The rusted locket the matron handed me on my 18th birthday had an inscription I couldn't read, but when I finally opened it 3 days later, the address inside led me to a hayloft containing $2 million in cash. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button while you're here. Tomorrow, I'm dropping a story that's going to blow your mind. The fluorescent lights in Mrs. Richardson's office flickered the same way they had for the past 11 years I'd lived at Meadowbrook Home for Girls. She sat across from me, her reading glasses perched on her nose, sliding a small padded envelope across the desk with the kind of careful movement that suggested whatever was inside mattered more than she wanted to let on. "Claire," she said, and I noticed her voice had that tight quality it got when she was trying not to show emotion. "This arrived for you 16 years ago. It came 3 days after you were left here as an infant. According to our protocols, personal effects are held until a resident reaches the age of majority." I stared at the envelope. It was yellowed with age, my name written across the front in faded blue ink. Claire Marie. No last name, because I'd never had one. The state had assigned me the surname Bennett when I entered the system, but it had never felt like mine. My hand shook as I reached for the envelope. Inside was a locket, tarnished and rusted, hanging from a delicate chain that had seen better decades. It was the kind of thing you might find at an estate sale for $5. Nothing remarkable except for the fact that someone had thought it important enough to leave with me. "There's no note?" I asked, turning the locket over in my palm. The metal was cold and rough, the rust leaving orange residue on my fingers. Mrs. Richardson shook her head. "Just the locket, but there's an inscription on the back. We tried to read it when it first arrived, but the tarnish makes it difficult." I held it up to the light, squinting at the worn surface. There were definitely letters carved into the metal, but they were obscured by years of oxidation. I could make out what looked like an S and maybe a B, but the rest was illegible. "You can keep it with you when you leave tomorrow," Mrs. Richardson continued, "along with your documents and the standard transition packet. Have you decided where you're going?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Tomorrow, I'd officially age out of the system, and unlike some of the other girls, I had no foster family offering to let me stay, no college acceptance letters, no clear path forward. I'd managed to save $800 from my part-time job at the grocery store, and I had a friend from school whose family said I could crash on their couch for a few weeks while I figured things out. "I'll be fine," I said, because that's what you said when you had no other choice. That night, I lay in my narrow bed in the room I shared with two younger girls and examined the locket more carefully. The clasp was rusted shut, refusing to open no matter how much I pried at it with my fingernail. In the dim light from the hallway, I could see the inscription more clearly now. The first word looked like it might be Sarah, and there was definitely a B starting the second word, but the rest remained a mystery. Sarah? Could that have been my mother's name? In 18 years, I'd never known anything about the woman who'd left me at Meadowbrook's doorstep, with nothing but a blanket and this locket. The not knowing had been its own kind of torture, a blank space where a story should have been. I spent my last night at Meadowbrook trying to open the locket, working at it with tweezers and a bobby pin, until finally, at 2 in the morning, I heard a soft click. The locket popped open, revealing two things that made my heart stop. On one side was a tiny, faded photograph of a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair and sad eyes. She was standing in front of a barn, squinting against sunlight, wearing overalls and a white t-shirt. On the other side, where you'd normally expect to see another photo, someone had carefully folded a piece of paper so small I could barely believe it fit. I unfolded it with trembling fingers, terrified it might disintegrate. The paper was thin and yellowed, covered in cramped handwriting that was difficult to read in the poor light. I grabbed my phone and used its flashlight to make out the words. Claire, if you're reading this, you found the locket and managed to open it. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to do this myself. I'm sorry for everything. Your father doesn't know about you, and I can't tell him. His family would never accept us, but I've made sure you'll be taken care of. 312 Sycamore Road, Thompson Falls, behind the barn in the hayloft, under the loose floorboard beneath the window facing east. Everything I could give you is there. I love you more than you'll ever know. Mom, I read it 3 times, 4 times, until the words were burned into my brain. Thompson Falls. I pulled up Google Maps on my phone with shaking hands. It was a tiny town in Montana, about 600 miles from where I was in Idaho. 600 miles to whatever my mother had left me in a hayloft. The next morning, I walked out of Meadowbrook Home for Girls with everything I owned packed into a duffel bag and a backpack. Mrs. Richardson gave me a stiff hug and handed me the manila envelope containing my birth certificate, medical records, and a list of resources for young adults aging out of foster care. She had no idea that I had no intention of using any of them. Instead of heading to my friend's house, I walked to the bus station and bought a ticket to Thompson Falls with most of my savings. The trip would take 12 hours with multiple transfers, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I had a destination, a purpose, something that belonged specifically to me. The bus smelled like stale coffee and cleaning products. I claimed a window seat and watched the city fade into farmland, then mountains, then more farmland. I clutched the locket in my fist the entire time, feeling the rust flake off against my palm, studying the photograph of the woman who might have been my mother, Sarah. The name felt right somehow, like trying on clothes that actually fit for the first time. Sarah, who'd left me at an orphanage, but had also left me directions to something she'd hidden. Sarah, who'd loved me enough to prepare for a future she wouldn't be part of. I arrived in Thompson Falls just after sunset on a cold March evening. The town was smaller than I'd expected, barely more than a main street with a gas station, a diner, a hardware store, and a church. Mountains rose up on all sides, still capped with snow despite spring being just around the corner. The address from the locket led me to the edge of town, where houses gave way to properties with acreage. 312 Sycamore Road was a farmhouse that had seen better years. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and several windows were boarded up. But the barn behind it still stood, a massive structure with faded red paint and a hayloft visible in the upper level. No cars were in the driveway, and the house had that particular emptiness that suggested no one had lived there in a long time. I walked up to the front door anyway and knocked, waited, knocked again. Nothing. I tried the neighbors, a ranch-style house about a quarter-mile down the road. An elderly man answered, his weathered face creasing into concern when he saw me. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for information about the property at 312 Sycamore," I said. "Do you know who owns it?" He studied me for a long moment. "That's the old Barrett place. Been empty for about 15 years, ever since Sarah Barrett died. County owns it now, I think. Property taxes went unpaid for so long they seized it. Why are you asking?" My throat tightened. Sarah Barrett was my mother. His expression shifted from suspicion to something softer. "Is that right? I didn't know Sarah had a daughter. She kept to herself mostly, especially after her parents passed. Got sick when she was real young, couldn't have been more than 20 when she died. Cancer, I heard." "Do you remember her?" I asked. "Sure. Quiet girl. Worked at the feed store for a while. Her family had dairy cows back when the farm was operational, but that all ended when her folks died in a car accident. Sarah tried to keep it going by herself for a year or two, but it was too much for one person." He paused. "You look like her, you know. Same eyes." I thanked him and walked back toward the Barrett property, my mind racing. My mother had died when she was around 20, which meant she'd probably been 18 or 19 when she had me. She'd been alone, struggling to run a farm by herself, dealing with her parents' deaths. No wonder she'd felt like she couldn't keep me. But she'd left me something. She'd hidden it in the barn and left me directions to find it. The barn door wasn't locked, just stuck with age and weather. I put my shoulder into it and pushed until it groaned open wide enough for me to slip through. Inside, the air smelled like old hay and dust and mouse droppings. Farm equipment sat abandoned in the shadows, covered in cobwebs and rust. A wooden ladder led up to the hayloft. Several rungs were missing or broken, but enough remained intact that I thought I could make it. I tested each step carefully, my heart pounding as the ladder creaked under my weight. The hayloft was mostly empty, except for scattered bales of ancient hay that had compressed into hard, moldy blocks. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the walls, creating stripes of golden light across the dusty floor. On the eastern wall there was a window, just like the note said. I walked toward it, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. I knelt down and examined the floorboards. Most were nailed down solid, but near the window one board looked different. The nails were missing, and when I pressed on it, it rocked slightly. I worked my fingers under the edge and lifted. Beneath the board was a hollow space, and inside that space was a metal box about the size of a small suitcase. It was covered in dust and bird droppings, but when I pulled it out and wiped it clean, I could see it was a fireproof safe, the kind you'd use to protect important documents. What comes next is something I never saw coming. Stick with me and make sure you subscribe. The safe had a combination lock. 4 numbers. I tried random combinations, my birthday, the year, anything I could think of. Nothing worked. Then I looked at the locket again, studying the inscription I'd only partially read. Using my phone's flashlight and some water from my bottle to clean the rust, I could finally make out the full inscription. Sarah Barrett, 1998, 1998. I entered the numbers into the combination lock. 1, 9, 9, 8. The lock clicked open. Inside the safe were stacks of cash, hundreds of them, bills in bundles of $10,000, wrapped in plastic and labeled in my mother's handwriting. I pulled them out one by one, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold them. 20 bundles, $200,000. But that wasn't all. Under the cash was a leather journal. its pages filled with my mother's handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers and began to read. Dear Claire, if you're reading this, then you found what I left for you. I don't know how old you'll be when you finally get the locket, or if you'll even bother to look for this place, but I had to try to give you something, even if I couldn't give you myself. This money came from my parents' life insurance. When they died, I inherited $300,000. I used some of it to keep the farm running for a while. But I knew I was sick. The cancer was already spreading when I found out I was pregnant with you. The doctors said I had maybe 2 years if I was lucky. I thought about keeping you. God, I wanted to keep you so badly. But I was dying, and I had no family left to help. Your father, I can't tell you who he is. His family would make your life miserable, trust me. They have money and power, and they'd fight for custody just to make sure you didn't inherit anything from their side. This way, you stay anonymous, stay safe, and when you're old enough, you have this money to start your life. I couldn't put it in a trust or a bank account because they'd have found it. They would have found you. So I hid it, and I left you the only clue I could, hoping you'd be smart enough to figure it out. There's more. Under the false bottom of this safe, you'll find papers, deeds. Your grandparents owned this farm free and clear. I never sold it, even though I should have. I paid the property taxes for as long as I could, but I know they'll eventually seize it for back taxes if you don't claim it. The farm is in your grandparents' names. I'm including their death certificates, my birth certificate that proves I'm their daughter, your birth certificate that proves you're my daughter, and a will that leaves everything to you. A lawyer in town named Patricia Walsh helped me set this up before I died. She has copies of everything. If the county took the property, she'll help you get it back. I paid her a retainer that should cover the legal costs. I'm sorry I couldn't be your mother, Claire. I'm sorry you'll grow up without knowing where you came from. But you come from good people. Your grandparents were kind, hard-working, and honest. They would have loved you so much. Use this money to build a life. Go to college, see the world, buy a house, whatever you want. And if you want to keep the farm, do it. If you want to sell it, that's fine too. It's yours. All of it is yours. I love you more than words can say. I wish I could have watched you grow up. I wish I could have been there for your first day of school, your first heartbreak, your graduation. But at least I can give you this, a foundation, a beginning. Love always, Mom. I sat in the dusty hayloft with $200,000 in cash and a deed to a farm, and I cried for the first time in years. I cried for the mother I'd never known, who'd been dying and alone and scared, but had still thought ahead to make sure I'd be taken care of. I cried for all the years I'd felt unwanted, when the truth was I'd been loved so much that someone had hidden a fortune for me to find. When I finally composed myself, I examined the other documents in the safe. Everything my mother had promised was there. Birth certificates, death certificates, property deeds, and a letter from Patricia Walsh, attorney at law, explaining the legal situation and offering to help me claim my inheritance. The sun was setting when I finally climbed down from the hayloft, carrying the safe with me. I couldn't leave it here, couldn't risk someone else finding it. I needed to get to a hotel, secure this money, and figure out my next steps. Thompson Falls had one motel, a small place called the Mountain View Inn. I paid cash for a week's stay and locked myself in the room with the safe. That night, I called the number for Patricia Walsh that was in my mother's documents. A woman answered on the third ring. Walsh, Legal Services. Hi, my name is Claire Bennett. I'm calling about Sarah Barrett. There was a long pause. Sarah Barrett. I haven't heard that name in 15 years. How can I help you? I'm her daughter, I said, and the words felt strange in my mouth. She left me documents and told me you could help me claim the farm. Another pause, longer this time. Claire, Sarah told me about you before she died. She said if you ever found what she left, I should help you. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Patricia Walsh was in her late 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. Her office was in a converted house on Main Street, filled with file cabinets and legal books. She studied the documents I brought, comparing them to copies she had in her own files. This is all legitimate, she said finally. Sarah was very thorough. She knew she was dying, and she wanted to protect you. The farm did go to county auction for unpaid taxes, but it didn't sell. Nobody wanted property that far out that needed so much work. It's still sitting in county inventory. Can I get it back? I asked. Yes, you're the legal heir. We'll need to file a claim with the county, prove your identity and inheritance, and pay the back taxes. Based on what I'm seeing here, you owe about $18,000 in accumulated taxes and penalties. I thought about the $200,000 hidden in my motel room. I can pay that, Patricia smiled. Then let's get started. The legal process took 3 months. Patricia filed all the necessary paperwork. I provided DNA evidence proving my relationship to Sarah Barrett, and I paid the back taxes in full. The county was happy to have the property off their books, and by early summer, I held the deed to 60 acres of farmland and a house that needed serious work. I used some of the money to make the farmhouse livable. I hired contractors to fix the roof, update the plumbing and electrical systems, and repair the structural damage. I bought furniture from thrift stores and yard sales, planted a garden, and slowly turned the abandoned property into something that felt like home. The community of Thompson Falls welcomed me cautiously at first, then with genuine warmth when they realized I was serious about staying. The elderly neighbor who told me about my mother, whose name was George, brought me vegetables from his garden and taught me about maintaining rural property. The woman who ran the hardware store, Linda, gave me advice on everything from painting techniques to dealing with well water issues. I enrolled in online classes at the community college studying business and agriculture. I wanted to understand the land I'd inherited, to honor the legacy of grandparents I'd never known, and a mother who'd sacrificed everything to give me a chance. With the remaining money, I started a small business. I restored the barn and began buying damaged furniture from estate sales, refinishing it, and selling it online. It turned out I had a talent for seeing potential in broken things and making them beautiful again. Maybe it came from being a broken thing myself for so long, finally finding someone who saw potential in me. One afternoon, about a year after I'd found the safe, I was working in the barn when a truck pulled into my driveway. A man in his mid-40s got out, looking uncertain. He had dark hair going gray at the temples and the same sad eyes I'd seen in my mother's photograph. "Can I help you?" I asked. wiping sawdust from my hands. "I'm looking for Claire Bennett," he said. "I heard Sarah Barrett's daughter was living here now." Something in his voice made my heart beat faster. "I'm Claire." He took a deep breath. "My name is Michael Harrison. I think I might be your father." We sat on the porch, and he told me his story. He'd been 19 when he met my mother, home from college for the summer, working at his family's lumber company. They'd fallen in love, but his family had disapproved because Sarah was poor, because her family worked with their hands, because she wasn't part of their social circle. "My parents threatened to cut me off if I didn't end it," Michael said, his voice heavy with old regret. "I was young and stupid and scared of losing their approval. So I went back to school and left Sarah behind. I didn't know she was pregnant." "How did you find out?" I asked. "I hired a private investigator a few months ago to find Sarah. I've regretted leaving her for 25 years. I got married, had a family, built a successful business, but I never forgot her. When the investigator told me she died in 2000, I thought that was the end of it. Then he found out about you. I showed him the locket, the photograph, the journal. We talked for hours, and slowly I began to see the man behind the story. He wasn't the villain I'd imagined when I read my mother's warning about his family. He was just someone who'd made a mistake when he was young and had spent decades living with the consequences. "I don't expect you to think of me as your father," he said as the sun started setting. "I don't deserve that, but I want to help if you'll let me. I want to be part of your life, whatever that looks like." I thought about my mother's words in the journal. She'd hidden me to protect me from his family. But Michael's parents had both passed away years ago, and he was his own person now, not the scared teenager who'd made the wrong choice. "I need time," I told him honestly. "This is a lot to process." He nodded and handed me his business card. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." Over the following months, Michael visited regularly. He helped me repair fences, taught me about the lumber business, and told me stories about my mother that made her feel real in ways the journal couldn't. His wife and adult children welcomed me cautiously, and eventually I became part of their complicated, blended family. Michael also helped me establish the Sarah Barrett Scholarship Fund for young women aging out of foster care. We used part of the money my mother had left me to create a permanent endowment that would provide financial support for girls like me, who reached 18 with nothing but determination and hope. On the second anniversary of finding the safe, I stood in the hayloft where it had all started. The barn was clean now, renovated into a workshop where I created furniture that sold across the country. The farm was profitable. The house was beautiful. I had family, friends, and a purpose. I pulled out the locket, which I wore every day now. The rust was gone, cleaned and polished until I could see the inscription clearly. Sarah Barrett, 1998. My mother had been younger than I was now when she died, but she'd managed to give me everything she had: land, money, family history, and, most importantly, proof that I'd been loved. Thank you for listening to Claire's story. If it touched you, please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered something that changed your understanding of your past? Share your story with our community. And click on one of the videos on your screen for another incredible journey. Until next time, remember that sometimes The most valuable inheritances aren't just what we're given, but the strength we find in claiming them.